Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Welcome to the So Emotional podcast. I'm Angela Wetzel.
And I'm Nick Carl. And Angela Wetzel is found on Instagram, Epic Initiator. And I wrote down a note this time about what she does. She's a certified professional coach and a deeper dating mentor, former U.S. Army sergeant, actor, comedian, writer, daughter, sister, friend, bereaved dog mom, and a really cool lady, Angela Wetzel. That's what she does. And I wrote a note for me too. Autodidact, self-taught. I'm just nerd galore, nerd across the board. That's who I am. Interested, curious, and that's us. We are the So Emotional podcast. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, Angela. It's nice to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. We picked out some topics, things that we've been kicking around this week, and one that we got into was the we talked a little bit about addiction last week. We talked about substance. We talked a little about marijuana. And this week we're going to talk about sex and love addiction. And it was from some of our conversations last week where I started to contextualize my own relationship between addiction, which was, we talked about it as a term of when you don't have enough good things going in your life, enough love or enough joy that's like circulating in your being, you will find a thing that has some of those qualities to bring it with you or bring it close to you so that you can experience these things.
You can feel good.
So you can feel good.
Good
Now,
when you're so awful.
the tricky thing was that, you have the very natural drives of sexuality, right? But in parsing these things, because I don't know, like I told you this before, but I'll say it again. It was something that I had said to myself a few times during like sort of sexual encounters, where it's kind of funny because now that I've gone in reverse and like thought about instances in my life that I have these little aha moments, but they're so like out of context that they don't make sense to me, but they make sense to me now. And I had said to myself regarding, it was just like a particular sexual encounter, and I can't remember which one it was, but it made me feel like a real boy. Okay. And so, I don't know. So what I was fulfilling there is not necessarily, that like aha, like settle into moment. It's not about like I got my physical needs met, right? So it wasn't about the drive or the sexual drive that got me there. It was about being seen and felt and like taken care of, which is like a heart-based, connection-based, which is something we mentioned last time too, that connection is as important as breathing, right? And so, I don't know, there's just this strange overlap between the physical drives, which we all kind of think that are healthy and good, right? That are intermixed, like interwoven with these other drives that I think that I think it goes without saying that across the board, everybody thinks like, oh, you have sexual drives and everybody knows that and it's sort of accepted, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I don't think that is sort of as accepted as sexual drives is the need for connection, right? Which I think, in my personal experience, is primary to a sexual fulfillment.
Right.
What do you think
So
about that?
people call that being like demisexual, that's like a term. So if you need emotional connection in order to have sex, then there's a definition around that, which I find that to be really interesting because neuroscience says that every single decision that we make is actually emotional on some level.
Mm.
So it seems weird to me to classify people separately if they need an emotional connection before sex. Um, but your comment about like being a real boy, and what makes me think of Pinocchio, right? Like being real. And what was the name of the island? Was it is it Pleasure Island or like
Yeah,
Treasure
no,
Island?
I think it was Pleasure Island. Yeah.
Pleasure Island, right? And then it was like, what happened to all the kids that like went to Pleasure Island? Did they like turn them into donkeys or something?
Yes, they turned them into donkeys.
Right. So like there was like a message there that like if you get to Pleasure Island and you get involved in all this like debauchery and hedonism, that you're gonna be turned into some kind of ass
Right.
because you are an ass. But oh, anyway, so there's like so much shame and all kinds of things like layered into this topic because the sexual drives are so instinctive.
Right.
And the thing that you were touching on is like what you were really wanting was this validation of your own existence and to be seen and to be and to feel that like deeper connection. And I think so often when it comes to getting our wires crossed with drives and versus like inspiration or like the thing that we really want is we can confuse the drive that can become sort of a means and thinking that if we achieve that, then we're winning and that we get the thing that we want. But what we're really after is so much deeper, like it's
Right.
emotional.
Right.
And so a lot of people will continue to chase the drives, the feeling, the what is it like? What do we say in society? It's like the quick fix or the instant gratification.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So we chase the instant gratification thinking if I get that thing, then I'm going to get the feeling, but we'll really want the
Right.
feeling. And then,
It makes me think about this was a few years ago, but it was a relationship I was in. And so uh, sex begins, there's like the sexual dynamic part of it. And that was really good. And so I thought to myself like at the time like this is great. Our connection in this way is fantastic and it just like works. But for me what ended up happening is that like the reality of the situation begins to set in, right? As it's like, oh, here we're having sex. This is good. Good things are happening. But that like sheen starts to sort of fall away. And the thing that starts to happen, that began to happen in me, was that I began to solidify. Like I just began to close. Like it was slowly at first, but it happened like gradually. So it's like, here's the thing I thought that I wanted, like, was a relationship with somebody. We can like share all these nice body things, and yeah, that was great, right? But the actual thing that I was actually after, which is sort of like intimacy or to be seen, I didn't have a good relationship with how to actually do that, right? I didn't know how to sort of approach that, and so like at the time of that particular relationship, that whole dimension of my life seemed to be closed down. Like it was just off to the side. Like it existed, it wanted to be known, but like I just was not connected to it at all.
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So the relationship started and it was like there was lots of good sex and stuff happening.
Right.
And then what caused the like shutting down part or the
I can't say that it was one thing. There was like a normal progression to the relationship, which is like, okay, you're gonna date, you like have your own places. But I honestly think that it really was kind of like it was time for it to progress. Like it lasted, like a couple of years, and then it's time to like, well, you move in together, or you get married, or you just go to the next level. And that, for me, I just know that when that happened, in my mind, it became very black and white. Like the thing, again, it didn't make sense to me at the time, but like, she wanted me to move into her house. I couldn't imagine where my stuff would go.
mm,
It was just like I didn't see a place for me, right? It was just like I don't physically know, like I'm gonna be like segmented off to like some like corner closet in the basement or something, you know? Not that I was going to be integrated in to be like a real person in that place. It was that this is just, you know, this is not like higher mind stuff. This is like something else. But like that I was going to be segmented to some part of the basement, right? And that I was going to be subjugated to that place. And I just like couldn't see it. I'm like, no, I just can't see that. I can't see myself in this world, right? And like, I still want to go there. I this thing, this whole this person in this situation, I like, and I'm like headed over there now, you know. But like, the idea of like taking it to like the next level, just like put the brakes on internally pretty hard. And from there, it was just a closure that begins to happen, you know. So I don't know how that works with the addictive process. Maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that can tie into it for sure because the the seat of addiction, I believe, is really just our own inability to be able to accept the emotions that are and know how to just hold space for them and allow them to be.
Right.
And for so many of us, there just wasn't modeling around what to do with emotions, and so emotions become triggers.
Right.
Like feeling bad emotion, that's a trigger, and then it's like, oh shit, I'm feeling something horrible, and I don't know what to do with it, and I'm just suffering.
Right.
Now I just need something to feel good. And
Mm-hmm.
then once you find something that's a coping strategy that feels good, whatever that is, working too much, smoking weed, a glass of wine or two to take the edge off, blow, whatever it is,
Right.
sex,
But
porn, right? You know, blow, all
yeah,
those things.
or like lots of good sex with somebody you like, right? I mean, that could be a thing too.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the thing that's confusing with between drives and like inspiration is when you have something that is like such a natural instinct or a natural drive.
Right.
Like humans were sexual beings, like from the moment we're born, like, you
Right.
know, already sexual, already on a course of sexual development. And then we can get sex confused with love, or you know, depending on people that have had sexual trauma or sexual assault or sexual abuse early on, then the way that that person can understand love is only via sex, and so those wires get crossed there. And then it's like, what is love? I don't really know. I just identify with people through sex. And I think we had gotten on this topic because I had seen that movie called Thanks for Sharing.
Right.
It's about sex and love addicts, and of course, like addiction and sex addicts. Like it's so stigmatized. Like um, people think that a sex addict is someone that just has to go around having sex with everyone all the time. And like, sure, cheating, having tons of sex, not being able to control that is part of it, but it can be porn addiction. It can be having to like having sexual stimulus at all times and compulsory masturbation and things like that. Just like needing that, like your genitals, porn, all those things become like the safety net,
Right.
like the way of feeling good. And then, of course, in society, when that gets out of control and you're starting to do things in public and it's affecting your job. And for anyone who wants to watch the movie, it is pretty good. And they, some of the characters spectacularly crash.
What was the name again?
It's called Thanks for Sharing.
Okay. And
It's
then
really,
another part of that movie that I know that we talked a little bit about was the strategies that they employed to deal with their addictive
great.
processes.
Yeah. Um, and so watching it, it was a little bit difficult for me because I wanted to like talk to them a little bit and be like, God, what are you doing? Because what I think is tempting to do is to say I have this addiction or this thing, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep myself from doing that. So I'm going to insulate myself from the exposure of that addiction.
Right.
So in the case of sex addiction in the movie, they're like um, paying attention, like where their eyes are. Like Mark Ruffalo's character, like he has TVs taken out of his room, the cable removed. He doesn't travel with a laptop. He doesn't take the subway. There's all these ways where he avoids the temptations. But in that way, it's like it's like wrapping yourself in bubble wrap or having like bumper lanes on everything in life, and you don't build your resilience, you don't build the muscle. And so the real skill set that he was needing, the muscle that we all need to build, is emotional resilience, and to know how to kind of understand the process of like dealing with our own emotions. Because if we don't do that, then it's like it's kind of like, I think it's the same for everyone. Like you have good feelings, you have bad feelings, and if you get triggered around your bad feelings and try to push those away, it causes more suffering,
Right.
causes the need to reach out or distract or find a coping strategy, because
Hmm.
you've introduced suffering by introducing resistance. But that resistance comes from being afraid, more than likely, that you don't know what to do with this feeling, or this feeling will swallow you, or there's
Right.
something very bad or something very wrong or shameful about feeling it.
Right.
Um, and let me know if you want to interject, but I was thinking about this conversation I was having earlier today where, and we were talking about dry drunks. So you can avoid the object of addiction or the process of addiction all you want. And some people um, will swing to one side and like completely avoid, for example, um, gosh, such a huge topic because I'm thinking of like, where would sex addiction and like the stigma come from, or where could it come from? It could come from like maybe a really strict religious or like Catholic upbringing, or someone seeing sex abused or misused in a way, and so they vow to never have sex or try to avoid it because there's like pain surrounding it, or seeing our parents have relationships where um, knowing if like dad spends time with mom, and then when she goes away dad has a spiral, and then suddenly we're no longer safe because dad is emotionally unsafe because he's spiraling. So there can be this like charge that occurs around the thing, and in this case sex. And so when that child becomes an adult, there's a charge or an already a stigma or a judgment around sex being this thing that they don't have control over, or if you have sex, it means you lose control or bad things happen. So I avoid sex completely to stay
Mm.
safe, right?
Mm. Hmm.
And it's like the same as just an alcoholic avoiding alcohol. And once you have your first taste of it, or you have sex for the first time, you can swing on the opposite end of the pendulum where you move from deprivation to complete, um, just inundate,
Annihilation.
yeah, just like swimming in it, and forget that where you started was on the other side. And it's like neither of these extremes are healthy extremes.
Hmm.
One is avoidance out of fear, and one is just kind of giving into it, and that can have negative consequences as well.
Right.
So it's learning to build those muscles by confronting those fears and learning that you are more powerful than that substance or than that addiction, that you're more powerful, that you do have control. And of course you can involve like a higher power in order to like help get you through. But there's a part, I think, that what's important is that we do cultivate this sense of agency, or self sovereignty and power around our own ability to manage and navigate our own emotions with confidence.
So you mentioned like a setup where a child could be exposed in a certain way, and I can see that too. And I hadn't thought about that. That you could be predisposed at some young age and make some fundamental decision that you weren't going to dance in whatever avenue that it is going to be, as a form of the bubble wrap around you to never touch the thing, which is precluding you from actually dealing with the deep emotional woundings that you have around that particular issue, right?
Yeah, especially if you saw a parent suffer with that, or
Right.
you suffered as a consequence of that parent being involved in it.
Right.
It is a good potential.
When I think about the term the dry drunk, though, which I think is there could be ties into childhood, and I'm sure that there would be, but I think somebody could also just white knuckle it, right? Just decide, sort of like I imagine Mark Ruffalo did, like, okay, I can use my adult brain to come up with strategies just to wrap myself in bubble wrap so that I just don't get exposed to that stimuli, right?
Yeah, and he did.
And he
Really,
did,
like 5 years
right?
of sobriety.
So when I think about my own sort of journey back into emotions, it's it makes me think about kind of like how hard that could be for people because um, I definitely have all my a bouquet of addictions that I deal with, right? But that wasn't necessarily how I was introduced into emotions. But that kind of like I talked about that, like I was in a nice relationship, a nice sexual relationship, and then there was the emotional like heart thing on the other side that was just it was in a different dimension, right? And so I can imagine like Mark Ruffalo, the thing that is pushing him around is actually compelling him to act out through the addiction is in his heart, is in his emotional place. And then what is his relationship to that place? So, from my personal experience, like I was completely divorced, right? When I found my emotions, it was like finding an ocean in my backyard. It was like, oh, no fucking wonder why I'm bent out of shape, you know? It's like, I got this motherfucking body of, oh my God, back here, right? And that blew my mind. And so, if like, that's even just one example of how divorced you can be from the force that's actually compelling you, right? So that's where I think probably getting help from people who are in the know or going to therapy, you know, I think that just the just the fact of somebody being there with you in that space, you know, can help buffer you and like keep you grounded, you know, the last in within the last week, I got into some pretty deep shame and deep emotional stuff, and there was a couple of moments where I felt like eclipsed, you know, that like I couldn't handle it, you know, and I was sort of spinning. And I can imagine that in those moments, if somebody was there with me feeling those things, that I could have like buffered that a lot better, you know. But it
Mhm.
just makes me think about that space between, okay, here's Mark, you know, insulating himself, trying to deal with the sex addiction, but then what is the space to that compulsion of his, you know, about how he comes into relationship with it? Because I think it's probably a little bit different for everybody, right?
Right. In the movie, it seemed like his trigger was around abandonment.
Hmm.
And from there, it was like, I think whatever those deep emotions, because it's like, it is avoidance of those deeper emotions because usually they tie into like core wounds, like very deep traumas.
Right.
And whatever that was, and so then he like spirals pretty hard. He starts like doing all the things, um and I'm sort of going blank.
That's
But
okay. Yeah. And so to say core wounds, right, is
oh,
like,
I just remembered,
yeah.
so what I was going to talk about was just so blank
You're doing great, by the way.
again. I wanted to I remembered and then I forgot again, but it was, it was co-regulation and self-regulation. That's what it
Okay.
was. Yeah. But the other thing about that movie, so what they showcased really well in that movie was the importance of co-regulation because they have
Mm.
sponsors and like reaching out to
Right.
like that was such a huge part of it. Like reach out and get help because I think
Yes.
that's that can be a huge thing. Like, and it's important for everybody to like reach out when you're spinning or you find yourself in that place of shame.
Right.
They did that really well. They're like, get to a meeting. Like, if you have serious shit going on, 90 meetings in 90 days. You're going to meetings every day. If you're having like a crisis where you feel like you're going to spin out of control and you're going to do something, like get to a meeting.
Right.
Know where all the meetings are, right? But the thing that I felt that they didn't touch a lot on was the self-regulation part and being able to manage those triggers and self-soothe,
Mm.
which is so huge when it comes to just being able to um, have your own back in the absence of someone being able to be there for you,
Right.
and also help you to navigate, because it's like seldom, it's less likely it's going to be this huge thing that happened that's going to trigger a relapse, but there can be really big things that happen, like fights
Sure.
within your family, like big shameful moments, like failure, abandonment, breakups. All these things, of course, are really big.
Yeah.
But in the day to day, it's like the little tiny things that happen that cause your energy to slowly start going down, down, down.
Mm.
You're like down here and you're like, how did I get down here? And I'm feeling so awful. And it's like, oh yeah, it was over the course of a day, of over 2 days, over a week, all these things that I wasn't able to like check in and feel and validate myself and self-soothe.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things I've been doing lately is I drive in the truck a lot, and I will look at myself in the mirror, right? And there's like a new energy of like there's a calmness in my own eyes that I can identify with. So like I'm connecting with myself then, and trying to feel those things. But I think it's, and I think that you would agree that it's a whole process to learn how to show up and to be with yourself, right? And to connect with yourself and to show up for yourself and to feel yourself too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and I like that. I do think that reaching out to and co-regulating, so it's like you're not alone, being alone is terrifying, right? It can be very terrifying, especially when big things come up, and can be really hard to deal with, even as adults, right? Absolutely. And so, in those times, and I've done that plenty of times, reached out and co-regulated. It's like, grabbing on, grabbing onto a rock just to make sure that I'm not going to float away to outer space. So that's like a really important part. And I'm getting better at like figuring out ways to show up for myself and to regulate myself when I struggle. So,
Yeah.
yeah, cool.
Um, I know that we were talking, we've had many conversations about like sexuality just being about like friction sometimes, like it being there to just like satisfy that urge, and it
Mm-hmm.
can be really tempting to chase the just to chase like sexual encounters, like, oh, I'm horny and therefore I must do XYZ. And I think lately there's also this thing in society, like the sexual revolution for women, that kind of, to me, it's like the same thing as how we're sold beef on a regular basis, or protein. Like you need protein, and it's like women need their steady diet of meat stick, and it's like vitamin D. It's like super important, and it's like the whole Sex in the City era.
Okay.
It's really, I just think it's interesting because I think what used to be, or something that was like I need your input on this, because it's like sexual empowerment for men. Like there's something in the conquest, right, about like being there, like what we were talking about a little earlier, like X marks the spot, like you're in the spot, you're having sex, and it can feel powerful and like winning, right?
Sure.
like element of like, yeah, I'm doing it, I'm winning, like I'm a man, and yeah, I'm grr, right?
Absolutely.
And I think this like women's sexual revolution is also like women are have kind of adopted this like, yeah, like I get to have sex too, and now I'm going to go out and just like I take my supplements or just like I have protein in my diet, I'm going to have sex like whenever I want to have it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that's also like a form of winning, and maybe also a way that we've convinced ourselves is like synonymous with sexual health is to be sexually expressive and doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And I think that again, it's kind of like the advertising is really good around it. You're empowered. You're an empowered woman,
Right.
and you're
You get to decide just like anybody, and you get to decide like any man when it's time for you to have
yeah,
sex, right? And
right,
there is no moral shame around it,
right.
right?
Which I think in a lot of ways is really good. And then
Yes.
and then there's the popularity of like polyamory and open relationships and all these different things. Like there's an entire sexual revolution, and even inside of that, it's like decidedly emotionally empty.
Right.
And I think what will continue to happen is people will start, well, hopefully, people will discover that what they're really wanting is something more meaningful that's about emotional intimacy and connection that's beyond just like friction and orgasm and like cream pies, which is just like, like the fascination with like, I watched Jackass with my mother. Anyway, it was a whole thing. She wouldn't decide on the movie. I took charge and I regretted it, but I wanted to sort of teach her a lesson and I taught myself a lesson. But that movie had so much cum in it,
Mm.
like even from the beginning. And it's just interesting how our society, like, I guess our society, and maybe this comes from I don't even know. There's like a lot of intersecting points like happening in my brain right now, but there's almost like this the goal of orgasm and coming is like such a thing, and yet what happens after that? Like what happens after that's achieved, and then like what happens to your energy because of that?
Right.
Is it generative? Are you actually connecting? Or are you suddenly alone in the presence of
No.
another person? And is your energy depleted because you actually expended your energy towards some end goal and you actually wound up empty? You know what I'm saying?
Right. So, I thought about the very animal nature of it, like there is like some aggressive animal nature of like, and then X marks the spot, right? Like, there is some power in there, physical,
And
real,
I'm
right?
there.
It's just like, it's like, oh yeah, oh, I'm the man. But I think too about when I discovered, was shown, thankfully, my own emotional ocean, right? Okay. So I had gone through my life, had plenty of sexual encounters, right? Not starved in that avenue at all, and very like friction and physical based, and felt a lot of that power. But two, there's like, okay, well, but it didn't fix anything. It didn't it didn't really necessarily move the needle. And then when I practice it with somebody, it's like you see what happens. There's actually a collapse there. So there's not it's not generating strength, right? It was kind of like depleting me over time, and then I was left with what's left over, and that's all the things that I hadn't dealt with at all.
Can you talk about that more? Because I am so curious to hear about it from your perspective, like talking about having sex, but then being depleted by it.
Yeah, well, in the collapse, so you come, right? And it's just a collapse, right? And then the thing that runs into its place is all sorts of like emotions and like worries and things, you know? It is just like, so you fill the space, you fill your body, and you're like, you know, you're He-Man, you know? Especially if you're like feeling good and you have a lot of good energy, you're just like, you know, ha ha, you know, doing your thing or whatever the fuck it is, you know? And then once you come, it's just like a precipitous drop of energy, right? And then, yeah, what's left over? What's left over is a type of nakedness, right?
Like ultimate vulnerability where
It
all
is
the
very vulnerable, but it does you know, there's plenty of times when it is not connected though, because like you haven't done the work of actually doing the connecting, right? Uh, there was like maybe sometimes, and I won't say that like across the board like it wasn't connected, you know, but there's definitely been times when like you haven't done the connective work, you sort of like, you know, do do all your hokey pokey, and then you turn yourself around, and then I've had instances where I essentially led myself directly into a panic attack, right? It was just like the the physical bubble like of strength that I had inside me. I let that go, and then bam, I
so
collapsed.
post coitus panic.
That's right, like full panic attack.
Hmm. And what
That
does that look like? Are you in bed, kind of lying there, like,
Yeah, I'm lying there like fucking rigor mortis, and you know, like my what I wanted to do at the moment was get my shit and fucking sprint out of there, right? But I'm
okay,
not like a total fucking asshole, you know. So I actually used my words, and I was like, I'm actually having a moment, you know. It's not good for the other person in bed. It's not. It's not. It's not a fun time, you know, to feel like the, you know, it wasn't very cool. But yeah, it did sort of happen. But what I think about is instead of you know, this is, and you said this, you said something about this earlier, which is like you're doing these things and hope to get these things, but you're not getting those things. I don't know. This is part of the addictive
it was
process.
like, well, it's part of the addiction process, but I think it's also something that everybody does, or there's like a trap that like I think almost everyone falls into, which is being attached to something as a means to getting what we want. So we think that this thing that we want is going to get us like these feelings.
Right.
And so it's chasing after. In this situation, it would be like sex or relationship or love
Right.
or that connection. Chasing after that. And when I achieve that, then the reason why I want this is because I want to feel all these things.
Right.
But really, we're getting our means goal confused with like our end goal. And the end goal really has so much more to do with the emotions we want to feel and like the
Right.
satisfaction and just
Right.
deeper.
Right. Okay. So being divorced from what the end goals are, what I actually wanted, you know, it's just like, okay, what's a more powerful thing than sex on planet Earth? I don't know. Not very many, right? Some would argue, and I think I would argue, maybe one of the most powerful things. See, it's like, well, I'm doing the most powerful thing, you know. It's like I'm right here, you know, I'm doing it, and so it's a strange situation to be in. It's like, well, I'm human, I'm alive, I'm a real boy, you know, like that
I'm
just happened.
a real boy.
I'm a real boy.
I
Like that just happened, but like what, you know, like, but there's still, you know, it was hard. It was definitely hard for a large part of my life to be able to like put my thumb on that thing that it is, right? But now that I found the ocean of shit in my backyard, it's like, oh, maybe the ocean has something to do with it, you know? And it's like, and that it does, right? So okay, so maybe we've sold women or everybody now. It's like, you know, you can be human. You can just decide whenever you want to have sex, you know. But are we all doing that to some extent? Like what we actually want, what our actual compersion is, what the deep thing that we want is connection and is to be seen, right? And well, one of the, you know, pseudo ways that we can be seen is to take our clothes off and fiddle with our bits, you know, and just, you know, rub them together. And I was like, oh, that feels pretty good, you know. I mean, that is a thing that you can do, which I think everybody does to a certain extent, right?
yeah.
But to be exposed to like hold yourself like when I began to feel my emotional stuff, it was under high pressure, you know. It still is under high pressure, you know. There's still a ton of shit in there, you know. Uh, yeah, I think that it's a liminal space, but I'm curious to like go exploring there, right? To go exploring into like what sexuality in connection actually looks like, right? So it's not we're just gonna rub our bits together and you know hit these little peaks and then call it a day, right?
Right.
It's to I don't you know and I'm sure there is some sort of melding there too about like you know you're going to embody inside your body, sort of like be naked in a way, but try to feel deeply back and forth into each other, right? To like be felt, to be feeling, you know, and try to explore and expose deep parts of your heart into something, right? And how deep does that rabbit hole go, right? Like how deeply can you be seen? Like how deeply can you feel into somebody, right? That's where I think that, you know, it gets a little bit more juicy, you know.
Or like how deeply can you let yourself be seen? Not
Right.
like not only in your nakedness, but your emotional vulnerability,
Right.
because it's about presence and removing the goal of performance and removing the goal of like
Yeah, coming.
orgasm, yeah, coming just being the thing. And it's like, can connection actually be the new goal, like connection and like deepening?
Right, and just generating like energy, generating and exchanging like energy together, right? Like how deeply can that dance go? You know?
Right. And does it even have to involve like penetration? Does it have to
Right.
involve everything that you see in porn? Like, do you have to reenact like the Eiffel Tower
Yeah.
and whatever, all this DP and
Yeah.
teabagging and
Do
whatever else there
do
is?
I
Like,
need DVDA? Do I need two dicks in my ass to like meet God? You know? It's like, oh, maybe.
maybe, I mean, sure, like that might be part of the human experience. Is like
Right.
maybe that's what, maybe that's on your path. Like that is part of your journey. Like
Right.
you embodied, you came here to experience media. That's so
But I
funny.
think I don't know. I think about it's tough to get close to people, you know? Because like as you open up as you get closer uh, over and over like you'll find little like oh oh
Yeah.
that's like oh gosh that's tough, you know. And I don't know, I saw that in relationships like a long time ago where you see somebody and you're like oh okay you guys are in a long-term relationship, okay, you're flying parallel now, you've like set up your flight pattern and then it's just parallel like I guess forever or until the parallel gets too toxic and it finally breaks down, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, so in like my mind I think about like commitments to that. It's like okay we're going to be actually committed to uh because it's tough because it goes both ways, like trying to be sensitive to who you are, right? Like trying to listen and to feel for the person you're with, because I think it's pretty easy. You could shut down all things, you know, and not be curious and not be sort of leaning in and get in your own lane and be like, well, I'm comfortable here. And like, and then somebody else maybe shows you a piece of themselves and you're just like, you know, get the fuck out of here, you know? And,
Yeah.
and so that doorway to openness, I think it's hard to like man that and to like be in this place of like always trying to like lean in a little bit more, you know? I mean, I think it's a tall order, but you know, it's I've been in relationships and I've like sort of see people who like you know about the parallel. They just get so far and then that's it, right? That's all that there is. And I think that maybe for a lot of people that is all that's all that they imagine even exists on planet Earth, right? Before I was introduced to my emotional body, like I had a vision of what existed on planet Earth, and I thought that I was like, you know, I've done all the drugs, I've been all dimensions. I thought I knew everything essentially, you know, not everything, but like everything about myself, you know. But then to find this other completely dynamic source of energy and love that like changes the inside of how your insides work and actually like makes your heart work, it's like, oh my God, like being human is like fucking wild, Uh,
Mhm.
I don't know. It just feels hidden, It feels hidden, and it feels like it's touchy. It's hard to like look in that direction, and to feel into that.
Yeah, actually, you're right. It is like a hidden dimension, especially in society and culture because there's so many restrictions and red tape around which emotions are acceptable and which aren't and like how we operate not only out in the world but like within our families. And so there's so much like prescriptive ideas that are just like this is how you do things, like this is how you show up in the world,
And a
like
lot of it's not even spoken. These are
yeah.
like
And
inferences on what's allowed.
right, because there's not a whole lot of consciousness or awareness around those topics, hence addiction and like the opioid crisis and all these different crises that we have going on, like the suicide rate. Like all of these are indicative of complete disconnection, isolation from our own emotional selves, and that keeps us from being able to connect with other people. And so we can be completely alone being married, and feeling unseen and unloved and not having any of our needs met. And we have a pandemic of loneliness.
Hmm. I was I had this daydream. It might have been today. It might have been yesterday. I'm not sure. But I was thinking like, how do people like get a better sense of the dimensionality of emotions? And this is what I thought about. I thought about dogs, right? So dogs have some emotion to them for sure, right? There is an emotional layer to them, and you can
Excitement.
pick. What's that?
I said a lot of it's excitement.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, and like it's maybe not as dynamic of a palette, like 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 those like you walk into the house and something destroyed, and all the dogs are sitting there with that like it was me like look on their face, it's like shame or whatever it is. So like that's a flavor, and it's usually pretty cute, but it's like yo, you fucker, you destroyed the couch, because they're reacting to your emotions, so it's like that, right? So I was thinking about like, okay, what if we could get people to kind of turn off their brain so you can't talk. Now you can say a few words to yourself and to other people, but they're going to be like just descriptors about how you feel, like like I'm sad or like I feel shame, But you couldn't really talk, and then you would just kind of be like a dog walking around, But you would have all of your human emotions there. I don't know how this actually works. But it's like I'm gonna walk around and be like a dog. I don't have language because I think language, when we start to use our words, just takes us up into our head, and then we're just abstracting everything, which just is just this crystal castle of thoughts that is not your emotional body and your feeling body, right? And like I can imagine being in front of someone naked, not thinking, but just feeling and being in my body, and about how vulnerable that is, and like those types of feelings that happen.
Mhm.
I don't know. I was just trying to like imagine different ways because I think everybody knows what it is because everybody has a relationship with it. But to become like more aware of like what are feelings, and like how do I like need to tend to mine, right? Because I think,
When you say it, everyone knows what it is. What is it?
okay, what an emotion is, right? Like, so people feel what
Yes.
like sadness is, right? People know what like elation is, and like the physical feeling in their body of what energy is currently possessing them. Like right now, like I'm like, see, I'm like stood up a little bit. I'm like, talking loud and fast. Like I'm excited, right? This is excitement in my body. These are the emotions of feeling good. Now I'm like engaging my brain and engaging my body. But I think about, so like 5 or 6 years ago, when I think mostly what I was feeling is just a disconnection, or um, disassociation, like that gets really fucking tough because if you've done that for a long time, it's like, what am I feeling? And it's like, well, I mean, I don't know. It's like I can feel it when like somebody hits my foot with a hammer. Aren't I feeling? Isn't that everything? And it's just like,
It's like trying to find a way into your feelings by analyzing it only intellectually.
right,
And it's like floating above the sensation and not actually being
right,
with it.
right. So I think, I mean, I don't know how to like armchair like a number on this, but I think that that happens a lot. That people aren't actually in their bodies to feel the sensations and get the messages from the moment about what is actually happening. Uh, that they're just kind of putting the bubble wrap around themselves. It's just like, well, if I don't do that and I don't do this and don't do that, then life will be like manageable anyway.
I can personally attest to living an entire portion of my life where I looked back and felt like I was sleepwalking
Right. Yes.
because
Yes.
I did not know that I was not feeling my emotions because I was, in fact, emotional, which
Mm.
is like kind of hard to explain, but
That's tricky, but this is one of the tricky things. That's what I'm saying. This shit is tricky.
it is very tricky and it's like subtle because I got married when I was 20 and I used to say to him because I was kind of, I was kind of stabbing him a little. I would like shank him a little and I would call him an emotional robot because I felt like he was not responding to or attuned to my emotions. Neither was I, spoiler alert. But I could like feel everything. I just didn't know what to do with it. And so like every like 3 or 4 months, I would have like an emotional meltdown where I would just be crying. I was like hyperventilating. It was full of like desire and needing and pleading and like a pulling energy and like one of the ways I describe this is like a silent scream. It's like there's no way of getting it feels like I'm feeling, but there's no way to get anyone to respond to what I'm needing. And there's no way to explain that. And even if that
Right.
person wanted to listen or respond, they just couldn't.
Yeah.
So it was just this awful feeling. And I didn't even know like what it was that I was experiencing. But he would sit there as I'm having this emotional meltdown thing. And I don't even think he wasn't like holding me. I was like, it's okay, babe, it's okay. It was more like he would sit there, like dissociated from what was happening, like observing it almost analytically, like, okay. And then like at the end, he would sort of be like, there was an energy. I don't even know if he said this, but I feel like he said this or something like this, like, oh, good. I'm glad this is over now. Like I'm glad, like, not, exactly that but like, oh, good, now that this is out of the way, we can get on with our lives.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people, it's like this is a familiar situation.
Yes. Yes.
This emotions here, these pesky, negative, unwanted, whatever.
Unfelt, ununderstand, uncontextualized, just like free
Right.
floating.
So then they're here and it's like they're happening and it's like the way that we interact with them is like somewhat messy or somewhat not attuned, like not gentle, not they're annoying. Like why are they here and why are they? Oh, and it's
Right.
like shit. But like wow, won't this just go away? I don't want to feel this anymore. Like what a thorn in my side, a pain in my ass. And then once that wave it's gone, it's like oh good, now I can like get on with my life. And it's like if our feelings they're like children it's like, oh shit, like how, like if we were treated like that, and likely we were, that's heartbreaking. But the fact that we continue to do this to ourselves and each other, oh, thank goodness, like they're not feeling this way anymore. Thank goodness I'm not feeling this way anymore. And now I can get on to the good things and whatever. And it's like every single emotion is like informing us as a messenger of something really important. And it's not necessarily about getting over it or thank goodness I'm done with it, but I understand like why people might feel that way. And I've felt that way myself too, like, oh, thank God, not feeling all that negative stuff. Because it is hard. It is really hard to be present and accepting and not rejecting of that negative emotion because of all the associations that we have with it. Um, but it's like if we encounter ourselves that way, and if that's how we relate to ourselves, then it makes sense why addiction is so prevalent,
Right.
because it's consistent self-abandonment and self-rejection,
Mm-hmm.
and then shame around feeling those feelings, which is
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not worthy of connection, I don't belong, I'm alone, and there is something wrong with me, I am bad, I'm flawed,
Mm-hmm.
which is so diametrically opposed to who we really are, which is like always connected, always accepted, always a part of the whole, having a purpose and a place in this grand scheme of life.
And when those parts are held in that rejected state, uh, the energetic cost to you, right, are things like addiction, right? Uh, if somehow we can come into relationship with those types of feelings and reclaim them and bring them back into our hearts, into our souls, those parts can become like precious gifts of our own being to ourselves, right? And then that energy which you know led you into a compulsion for like some kind of strong addiction can come into you. And think about that, just think about that in terms of raw energy that you could have integrated back into your own soul if you could find a way, right? It's
Mhm.
like, well, it's strong enough and they're big enough and they're important enough to make you do this super compulsed thing, right? Think if you could turn that around and bring these pieces back to yourself about what you get back in terms of like self.
Yeah.
I just think
And
that.
and also you're not expending all this energy by rejecting those emotions or spending that energy on resistance where you're holding the beach ball under the water.
Right.
Like there's a whole lot of energy that you're freeing up just in acceptance.
So think about Mark Ruffalo, sex addict, like wrapped in bubble wrap. His whole life is essentially managing this, right? So think about that he has all that inside of him and he has all of that energy and all of that life force to be whatever he is, right?
Mhm.
It's, I think that he, it's like you get to be whatever you want to be then, I think. Or it ends up looking a little different. I mean, that's idealistic shit, but I think that it's just like to me, it's just like a vision of possibilities.
Yeah, and this addiction, it wouldn't be larger than he was. He would be larger than it.
Right.
And it would be a part of his natural inclination to cope when he started to feel powerless. And it wouldn't be a disease that identified him, but it could be um, something that perhaps he identifies with, like in a moment or two or many, before he learns to separate his identification from it so that he can actually look at it with love and hold
Mm-hmm.
it,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to being a victim of it and then having that whole thing run his life because he's trying to avoid it.
Right. Right. And I don't know. I think that if anybody could do that, it could be super powerful and changing in their life. Yeah.
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 And that's like that's kind of the deal that we're all doing like every day, and again and again, like on rinse and repeat. It's moving up and down the emotional ladder and allowing that to be a natural part of the human condition without resisting or bracing, as much as we can, to
Right.
find acceptance in that and release the shame And how we do that is through normalizing some of these
Hmm.
things and just having the conversations.
Right. Like I mentioned, over the last weekend, I had a pretty bad shame spiral that did get on top of me. And I did an okay job of showing up for myself and being compassionate with myself. And there was a lot of different, really intense, hardcore emotions that had to come up and come through. And it was pretty rough. Um, but the on the backside of it, though, it was also interesting to feel how settled and almost I don't know, that it just felt okay. That was okay that that happened.
Mm-hmm.
There was just I mean, I'm hopeful that it is like a deepening of the process. Uh, that yeah, like I was a little mad at my emotional children, like for you know, I dealt with some of that of like things show up and being pissed that they showed up, and then feeling out of control, all that stuff was there too. But then there was also, other parts that were like protective and showed up for me and let me know that I wasn't like a total bag of flaming shit, um, and that I have resources and that I have people and that I have a good life and that like I have a lot of fantastic things going for me. So I don't know. It was just I just mentioned that to say that, like you said, like it is an everyday thing that we all have to do, and that I agree with that, and that like, you know, that shit happens. It's like sometimes you eat the bar, and sometimes the bar eats you.
I think it's hard it can be hard to trust that there is like a bottom to some of these emotions that you can actually fully feel them because when we've been when we've had certain practices or behaviors that have been habituated throughout our lives and that means that we have not been emotionally feeling things for decades, that when we become present to all that emotional energy that's there,
It's big,
it's big and it can feel like a lot and it can feel like I'm going to feel this forever, like
right?
always and forever. And it's like if you pay really close attention, you can see that it isn't solely traveling to the bottom of a very deep ocean, but that it's traveling to these depths and then coming out and experiencing different forms of frozen or stuck or depressed energy, and then feelings of rage and anxiety, things like that. And then also elation and connection and warmth. And then it can kind of be like a
Oh yeah,
crazy roller.
real yeah roller coaster, right?
Yeah. But I think one of the most important things is starting to establish that sense of trust within ourselves that we won't abandon or reject ourselves for feeling those feelings and just doing our best to stay present,
Mm-hmm.
and deciding that we will love ourselves no matter how we feel and that we still want us as we are.
Mm.
Like I still want to be with you even though you're not happy right now, even though you're not performing and entertaining, I still love you. Even when you're depressed, I still want you.
Mm-hmm.
You belong to me, even
Right.
now, when you're at your lowest
Mm-hmm.
and when you're at your happiest. Like, I'm here always for all of it.
I'm here and you're mine.
You're mine. Your mess is mine.
I like it. Sound good to you?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Don't develop.
Should we say something to wrap up?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay. I'm Nick Carl. This is Angela Wetzel. And comment. If you leave a comment, we'll read and maybe we can talk about these things. We just sort of riff. That's how we do it, right?
mhm,
Check us out on the socials, right?
mhm.
Epic Initiator on Instagram, and I am Gnarl Kick, NARLKICK on Instagram. That's me, and that'll be down in the social in the doobly doo down below.
Okay.
What do you think
And,
about that?
and thanks for listening.
Oh
And
yeah, thanks for listening.
reviewing is good too,
Viewing's excellent.
because that helps other people find it. If you like it, then they're like, oh,
Oh
other people
yeah,
might
sure.
like
I
it.
mean, people know how to do this shit. They know what to do.
Yeah, but then they forget, and then when you remind them, then they're like, oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, we would appreciate that then if you shared our stuff, and if you liked it, if it did the thing, it helps us, right? Help us, help you, help us. Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
All right. Righteous. Angela, thanks for hanging out today.
Hey, you're welcome.
We'll see you next week. Okay.
Bye.
So emotional. Out.